I never imagined my own daughter would leave me out in the cold. It was beyond belief that her husband would strip away my dignity during my lowest moment and that she would let him. But little did they know life had one final card for me to play. And when I played it, everything changed. This isn't just a story, it's a reckoning. My name is Margaret, and this is how it all unfolded. I'm 58 years old, and for most of my life, I believed in something called unconditional love, especially when it came to family. I poured everything I had into my husband, my daughter, and our life together. Every meal, every holiday, every penny I saved, all of it was for them. But when my husband passed from cancer last year, it felt like the ground beneath me crumbled. I kept telling myself, at least I still have Amanda. I still had my daughter. Or so I thought. I sold the home my husband and I had built in Cedar Park, just north of Austin. Too many memories, too many nights of hearing his voice in the kitchen. Amanda and her husband, Chad, offered me a place to stay. Or, at least Amanda did. Chad barely acknowledged my presence when I moved in. I tried not to make waves, staying in the small room at the back of the house, cooking, cleaning, offering to run errands. I kept to myself, trying to stay out of the way. But Chad had a way of making me feel like an intruder. His irritation was clear in the smallest gestures. He'd roll his eyes when I asked a question, change the TV channel when I was watching something. Once, I even heard him mutter freeloader under his breath as he passed by. I tried to convince myself I misheard, but deep down I knew I hadn't. Amanda, my daughter, said nothing. When I'd look to her for support, she'd play it down. "He's stressed, Mom," she'd say. "Work has been tough." I stayed quiet, swallowing the hurt. After all, that's what mothers do, right? Then came that one night, that one conversation that shattered everything. We were at the dinner table. I had made chicken pot pie, Chad's favorite. Amanda was on her phone, Chad sipping his beer, the silence at the table thick enough to cut. Then, out of nowhere, Chad spoke up. "You know, maybe it's time we stop pretending this is temporary," he said. "You're not contributing. We've got bills. We didn't sign up for extra mouths to feed." My breath caught. My heart pounded in my chest. I turned to Amanda, desperate for some support. But she wouldn't meet my eyes. "Maybe it's best," she mumbled, "if you find something more stable, for everyone's sake." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I just stood up, packed my things, 2 suitcases, that's all I had left, and walked out. Amanda didn't walk me out. Chad didn't even look up. I stood outside their building, the wind biting through my coat, realizing that I had nowhere to go. I checked into a motel that night, the kind where the wallpaper peels and the vending machine eats your change. I lay there awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything had turned so cold, wondering what I had done to deserve this kind of abandonment. The next morning, I sent Amanda a message. "I understand. I love you always." But she didn't reply. And the messages I sent after that, birthdays, updates, all went unanswered. 3 months passed. Each day felt longer than the last. I applied for jobs, but nobody wanted to hire a grieving widow in her late 50s with no recent work history. I thought about cleaning houses or babysitting, but my body didn't move the way it used to. The loneliness was suffocating, but worse than that was the shame. I had given everything to Amanda. How could she turn her back on me so easily? One evening, while going through a box of old family keepsakes, I found something that changed everything, a secret from my past, hidden in my mother's old diary. I opened it slowly, my hands shaking. There, in her neat handwriting, was a truth I hadn't known. A name. A secret. My mother had kept a part of my life hidden, and I never knew. For the first time in months, I smiled. This wasn't just about being cast aside. It was about reclaiming something bigger than I'd ever imagined. And that night, everything shifted. The game had changed, and I was ready to play it. The next few days were a blur. I didn't sleep much, and when I did, I tossed and turned, clutching my mother's diary. The discovery had shaken me to my core, but it had also ignited something within me, something I had forgotten I had. I was no longer just the woman who had been thrown out on the street. I was someone else entirely, someone with a past, someone who mattered. I knew I had to find out more about the secret, this truth my mother had left behind. I spent hours online, digging for anything I could find. It didn't take long before I found it, Harold James Sterling. He was the founder of Sterling Energy, one of the largest oil firms in Central Texas. A name I recognized from old newspaper clippings, a man of power, a man with a family, and a reputation that meant something. But there was more. My mother had mentioned him in her diary, and now I understood why. I didn't know how to process the knowledge. But I did know one thing: this man, this legacy, was part of me. So I took a deep breath and did something I never thought I would. I reached out to his lawyer, Leonard Goldstein. I sent a letter, handwritten and heartfelt, explaining who I was, who my mother had been, and asking for a conversation. I wasn't sure what would come of it, but I knew I had to try. 2 weeks later, I received a call. Leonard Goldstein's voice cracked when I mentioned my mother's name. "I always wondered if you'd reach out someday," he said. There was something in his voice that made me feel like I wasn't alone anymore, like I wasn't the only one holding on to a secret. He asked me to come to his office. The next morning, I was on a Greyhound bus to Dallas, my heart beating with a mixture of hope and disbelief. When I walked into Leonard's office, it felt like stepping into another world, quiet, filled with old books and the weight of history. He handed me a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. The letter was from Harold James Sterling. It was addressed to me, Margaret Louise. I couldn't breathe as I opened it, and when I began reading, the weight of his words hit me like a tidal wave. He admitted everything in the letter: the affair, the regret, the silent love. He even mentioned that if anything ever happened to him, he had made arrangements to ensure I was taken care of. There was a trust, a portion of his assets set aside for me. The letter included the name of his lawyer, Mr. Goldstein, who would ensure that I received what was promised. My hands trembled as I read the rest of the letter. The inheritance wasn't just money, it was my birthright. I sat there in Leonard's office, stunned, not knowing what to say. The papers he handed me confirmed everything: bank accounts, investment portfolios, property deeds, all totaling over $1 million. I whispered, "This is real?" Leonard nodded. "It's yours," he said. I couldn't speak. My mind was spinning. For the first time in years, I felt seen, like I wasn't invisible anymore. I stayed in Dallas for a few days, processing everything, walking through neighborhoods, and sipping coffee in silence. I didn't envy the people I saw. They didn't have to fight for their place in the world. They already had it. But something inside me shifted. I wasn't just Margaret, the forgotten mother, anymore. I was someone with a future, someone who had been lied to her entire life, but now had the truth to stand on. When I returned to Austin, I didn't go back to the motel. Instead, I rented a quiet apartment downtown. It wasn't lavish, but it was mine, and it was a world away from the place where I had been thrown out with nothing but 2 suitcases. I started making small changes, changing the way I dressed, the way I carried myself. I wasn't the same person who had begged to be seen. I was someone different now. I dove into learning real estate, investments, the language of business. I wasn't trying to build an empire, but I wasn't going to be helpless again either. It didn't take long for me to spot an opportunity. An apartment building in East Austin, not far from where Amanda and Chad lived, was being auctioned off. I didn't hesitate. With Mr. Goldstein's help, I created an LLC and placed the winning bid, all under the radar. I wasn't looking for revenge, but I was going to take control of the one place they thought they ruled. The auction was a quiet affair. No fanfare, no attention drawn to the woman quietly purchasing the property. I won, legally and discreetly, without anyone knowing who was behind the bid. I owned the building where Amanda and Chad lived. The place where they had kicked me out, where they had humiliated me in my weakest moment. Now I was the one in control. I didn't make a show of it. I didn't need to. The deed was mine, the power was mine, and it was only a matter of time before they would realize. A month passed, and I could feel the tension mounting. The first notification letters went out to the tenants. Rents would be reassessed, lease terms reviewed. For Amanda and Chad, their new rent was 3 times what they had been paying before. Market value plus overdue fees. Chad must have lost his mind. I didn't need to see it. I could feel his fury from miles away. He had always been the type to feel in control, to make others bend to his will. Now, the tables had turned, and the weight of his arrogance was about to crush him. Amanda tried to reach out to me, but I let her calls go unanswered. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about justice. And they needed to feel the weight of their actions. I didn't watch them directly, but I couldn't help but overhear from the building staff. Chad was unraveling. His temper, once a quiet storm, was now raging. Amanda, on the other hand, was starting to look more like a woman who had lost herself in his chaos. But I couldn't feel sorry for her. Not yet. She had stood by and let this happen. She had made her choice, and now she had to face the consequences of that silence. The next few weeks were quieter. The calls from Amanda stopped, and the angry notes from Chad became more frequent. He was demanding answers, threatening to call the press. He was scrambling, looking for someone to blame. The irony was that he was blaming me, the very person who had been discarded, and yet it was him who was losing everything. I could feel his panic from the other side of the city, and I couldn't help but smile. One night, I drove past the building. Their lights were on, and I saw the familiar silhouettes behind the curtains. I watched for a few moments, wondering if Amanda would ever wake up, if she would ever truly see Chad for who he was. But as I drove away, a quiet sense of satisfaction washed over me. It wasn't about watching them suffer. It was about the slow realization that everything they had was crumbling. Chad's behavior was becoming erratic. He began making threats. Empty ones, of course. But he wasn't just lashing out at me. He was lashing out at everyone. The tenants, the property manager, anyone who wouldn't bend to his will. And Amanda? She had become a shell of the woman she used to be. I didn't reach out to her, though. Not yet. This wasn't about fixing things for her. It was about giving her the space to see the truth. Then one day the knock came. Soft at first, then louder. I opened the door to find Amanda standing there, drenched from the rain, clutching a grocery bag to her chest. She looked like a shadow of the girl I had raised. Her face was pale, her clothes wrinkled, her eyes hollow. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I handed her a towel, and we sat in silence, sipping tea. I didn't ask why she was there. I didn't ask how she was. I just waited for her to speak. "I don't know where to start," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He's not easy. He's angry all the time." I stayed quiet. She went on, her voice shaking as she spoke of how Chad had started following her, reading her texts, questioning her every move. She even admitted that she had lied to him about me, told him she hadn't spoken to me in weeks. That was the moment I knew. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. I didn't have to think about my answer. "Because you had to see it, not just hear it," I said softly. Amanda stood there, her face full of regret. She didn't need me to say the words. She already knew the truth. I had tried to protect her, but now she was the one who had to find her way out of the cage she'd built around herself. Amanda's admission hit me harder than I expected. She wasn't the girl I once knew. This was someone else, someone who had been bent and twisted by her choices. But as much as it pained me, I knew I couldn't save her. Not anymore. She had to save herself. She had to find the strength to walk away from him, from the man who had made her believe she needed to be afraid. I couldn't fix her mistakes, but I could offer something else. Truth. "Mom, I've left him," she said, the words barely above a whisper. "He tried to go through my things again, my phone, my bag. He followed me to work last week. He thinks I'm hiding something." I didn't respond right away. The silence between us was thick, but it was different this time. There was no blame in the air, no guilt. Just raw honesty. She was finally facing the reality of the man she had chosen, and that was the first step toward healing. I stood up, my legs shaky as I walked to the window, looking out at the street below. "You can't manage a man like that," I said quietly. "You either survive him or you leave him." Amanda didn't respond immediately, and in that moment, I knew she was coming to terms with the truth. The truth about Chad, about herself, and about the woman I had become. The woman who had survived it all, even when they tried to erase me. I don't know who I am without him, she confessed, her voice breaking. But I'd rather find out than keep disappearing. Her words were a heavy weight, but also a sign of growth. Amanda had stopped being afraid of the unknown. She had stopped hiding behind Chad's control. That night, after she left, I sat alone, reflecting on everything that had happened. The pain, the betrayal, but also the strength it had all brought out in me. I had changed. I was no longer the woman who begged for their approval. I was the woman who owned the building they had once controlled. I was the woman who had taken the lessons of my mother's diary and turned them into something powerful. The truth had set me free, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't need to explain myself to anyone. The next day, I walked past Amanda and Chad's building. I had made upgrades, improvements that would benefit the other tenants. I wasn't doing this to punish them. I was doing it because it was the right thing to do. Chad, on the other hand, was still scrambling, still trying to take control. He didn't understand that the world didn't revolve around him. The tenants were finally getting what they deserved: comfort, stability, respect. A few days later, the notice came. Chad's rent had been raised, and he wasn't happy about it. He sent angry emails to the property manager, demanding answers. He called the management office, looking for someone to blame. But I wasn't there to answer him. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of hearing my voice. Instead, I watched from a distance, knowing that this was just the beginning. He would break, and I would be the one watching. Amanda had started calling me again. Short, hesitant voicemails, each one a little more desperate than the last. "Mom, I know things have been complicated. I miss you." I didn't pick up. Not yet. This wasn't about me making things easy for her. This was about her learning what it meant to be strong. She had to understand that I wasn't going to be the one to fix it all. Not this time. The calls from Amanda became more frequent, but still, I didn't respond. I wasn't ignoring her out of spite. I was letting her sit with her choices, letting her feel the weight of what she had done. The silence between us was my way of teaching her that sometimes the hardest thing you can do is to let go. To let someone face the consequences of their actions without trying to rescue them. Then one evening, the intercom buzzed. I wasn't expecting it. "Hi, this is Amanda Harmon," her voice trembled. I was wondering if Margaret, my mom, lives here. My heart stopped. For a moment, I didn't move. Then, slowly, I pressed the button to release the door. I wasn't sure what I was going to say when I saw her. But I knew this was a moment of reckoning. When Amanda walked in, she was drenched from the rain. Her shoulders were slumped, and there was an unfamiliar weight in her eyes: guilt, regret, and something else I couldn't quite place. I didn't say anything at first. I just handed her a towel and let her sit down. The room was heavy with silence as we shared a pot of tea, both of us knowing that words would come, but not yet. She was waiting for me to say something, but I didn't have to. She knew what I had been waiting for. "I don't know where to start," she whispered after a long while. "Chad's not who I thought he was. He's angry all the time. He's been going through my things, even following me to work." Her voice cracked. I didn't interrupt. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just tired of the lies, tired of the manipulation, tired of the silence that had surrounded our lives for so long. "I told him I hadn't spoken to you. I lied," she said, looking down at her hands. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't respond immediately. I just let the weight of her words settle between us. Then, softly, I said, "You didn't let him. You stood with him." She looked at me, stunned. Her mouth opened as if to argue, but she couldn't. The truth was there, hanging between us. It was hard for her to accept, but she had to. She had chosen Chad, chosen silence over truth. And now, she was facing the consequences of that choice. Amanda sat still, her eyes wet, but not a single tear fell. She was holding herself together, trying to find the words to fix everything, but I knew that couldn't happen. Not all at once. I stood up, walked to the window, and stared out at the street below. "You didn't become her all at once," I said quietly. "It was small choices, letting things slide, choosing peace over truth. Believing love meant loyalty, even when it hurt. I don't know who I am without him, she whispered again, her voice breaking. But I'd rather find out than keep disappearing. She had finally stopped running. She had stopped being afraid of what was to come. For the first time in years, Amanda was seeing the world with clear eyes. I nodded, but I didn't say anything else. I had said my piece. And now, it was up to her to decide what came next. Mom, I've left him, she said, breaking the silence. The words hit me like a wave, but this time, it wasn't the pain that stung. It was relief. I changed the locks, she continued. I'm done. I looked at her, my heart full of things I couldn't quite express. I had hoped, deep down, that she would find her way back to herself. And now she had. I'm proud of you, I said quietly. It wasn't the grand reunion I'd imagined, but it was enough. Later that night, after Amanda left, I sat alone on the couch, staring at the empty space where she had been. It wasn't the same as it used to be. The silence wasn't painful anymore. I had forgiven her. Not for what she had done, but for what she hadn't done. The silence between us had been broken, and that was all I needed. The days that followed were quiet. Amanda didn't call as often, but when she did, the conversations were real. She was starting over, and I was too, but not just with her. With my life. I had taken back control, not just over my circumstances, but over who I was. The woman who had been erased from their lives was gone. The woman who had been underestimated was now standing tall. A few weeks later, I received a letter from my lawyer. The building had officially been transferred. The tenants were settled, the lawsuits were resolved, and the property was now mine to do with as I pleased. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. I had already won the most important thing, my freedom. The next day, I sold the building. I didn't want to keep it. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. The proceeds from the sale went to a shelter for women and children in crisis. A place where people could find refuge, just like I had once needed. Half of it went to honor my mother, to build a wing named after her, the Ella Laner House. She had fought for me without ever being able to show it. Now, her strength was woven into the foundation of something new. As for me, I bought a small house in Cedar Park, a place where I could grow, heal, and finally live the life I had always deserved. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. And that was enough. Amanda came to visit a few times after that, and slowly, we began to rebuild what we had lost. She was healing, and so was I. The laughs we shared were real now, unforced, and for the first time, I felt the weight of years of betrayal lift off my shoulders. I didn't need her forgiveness. I didn't need to explain anything. I had my own redemption. And that, in the end, was the most powerful thing of all. Thank you for following along with this story. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters.